Hello and welcome to the Three Championship Drive podcast hosted by me, Lance Caporossi. I was recently asked if the Pistons win a fourth championship, would I change my podcast name from Three Championship Drive to Four Championship Drive? And that's how I know you're not like a hardcore Pistons fan when you ask me a question like that. Because the name of the show, Three Championship Drive, isn't named after because the Pistons won three championships. It's because the Palace of Auburn Hills was located on Three Championship Drive. Like if back in the day, if you were going to go to the Palace of Auburn Hills, typed in the address, you would go to Three Championship Drive. That is the street the Pistons played on. That's why I went with the name. I think there's a little historical significance behind it. It's fun. I think if you really know Pistons history, you mess with the name. That's why I love it. I'm not going to change it because they win a fourth championship because I didn't name it after the three championships. I named it after a street the Palace of Auburn Hills was on. And now you know. So I would not change the podcast name if the Pistons won a fourth championship. Now, if they asked me to, or if they came up with like a four championship drive, then I guess that would really irritate me though. I think even if they win another championship, I think if the Pistons eventually ever did get their own arena in Detroit, I think that they should put it back on Three Championship Drive. I think that would be great. I think that's what it should be. You shouldn't change it to anything else. Like I would hate for another guy to be like, well, I'm going to name my podcast the Fourth Championship Drive. It just doesn't have the same ring as Three Championship Drive. That's just my opinion. And I'll say it again. I think if the Pistons do get their own arena, they should have a street, Three Championship Drive, and that would be awesome. That would be great. Bring it back. I would love to have the street sign too. Somewhere, maybe I'll get like a replica of just a green and white sign. I hate those colors, but I'll get a green and white sign that says Three Championship Drive. Maybe I can get it in teal. I don't know. So me and another client, we were talking about this, and because I guess the Hall of Fame induction is coming and Amari Stoudemire's in it. This guy happens to be a huge Phoenix Suns fan. That's why we were talking about Amari Stoudemire. But he happens to be a Pistons fan too. So he's in my barber chair. And he's like, with the Hall of Fame, he's like, I'm surprised that this guy's not in the Hall of Fame. And it's Rasheed Wallace. So I asked him why. And I love this when we talk about basketball because we do always misremember. And sometimes the memories we have might be a little bit more exaggerated. Like, I loved watching Rasheed Wallace. I loved watching him in Portland. I loved especially watching him in Detroit. I think if you were to poll anybody from that era, you could make an argument that Rasheed Wallace is probably, in terms of talent and skill, probably a top three power forward from that era. In terms of talent and skill, I could say you could make an argument that he's up there because he really was incredible on defense and on offense. I mean, he was a stretch four, stretch five. He could block shots. He could rebound. Hell of a communicator. Could play on the block. Could play in the mid-range. Could play out to the three-point line. Underrated passer, in my opinion. Just a very good player. But the resume is just not enough. Like, I do think if you're strictly judging on talent alone, he's probably a Hall of Famer just on talent. But when you look at the entire resume, and I'm just looking at the NBA resume, it's just not enough. It's one championship. It's 4 All-Star appearances. It's a rookie team. And that's it. No All-NBA teams, no All-Defensive teams. And I feel like that matters. Like, the one championship is great. 4 All-Star appearances, that's great. But, like, All-Star appearances, those are popularity contests. And also, he was named to at least 2, or for sure 1. Well, he was named for 1 because the Pistons were just excellent that year, and 4 Pistons got put in. And I know that he was basically like a replacement player for another All-Star appearance when he was with Detroit. But I just think 4 All-Star appearances not enough to make you a Hall of Famer, but for sure talent-wise. And I do think Rasheed Wallace would have more accolades on his resume if he had treated the refs better and just really treated the media. I don't think he was too unfair with the media, but like, there was that time where he was just giving really simple answers, like really just a couple worded answers because he didn't want to get fined. And I don't know, man. I just think like he is definitely a victim of himself. Like he's talented, he's skilled, but like he also put himself into a box where he wouldn't be remembered the same way. Like he's remembered for the technicals, he's remembered for the fiery attitude, and he's remembered for being on the Pistons, but like that's not all basketball related. It's not always necessarily about his talent and his skill. It's about the other things surrounding it. I don't know. I think Rasheed Wallace, he left a lot of meat on the bones. That's what I've always said about his career. I'm certainly grateful for him. I do consider him one of the 4 greatest Pistons center because he did play a good portion of his time at the 5. I do think he belongs on that Mount Rushmore with a Bob Lanier, with a Ben Wallace, with a Bill Laimbeer. I think he belongs up there. He didn't achieve as much as the other guys, but like I think skill-wise and talent, he belongs up there. The second guy I'm going to talk about just real quickly is Blake Griffin, and I still think, same thing with Rasheed. Hell of a talented player, incredibly skillful-wise, took the Los Angeles Clippers and took them from like an afterthought in the NBA to being like one of the premier teams with a huge national television draw. He did that. And I think he has more of a case as a former Piston to make the Hall of Fame than a Rasheed Wallace because he's been nominated to the All-Star game 6 times, and he has 5 All-NBA honors, 3 second team, 2 third teams, one of those with Detroit. I think that resume itself, even without the championship, I think that looks better on paper and looks better towards someone voting on the Hall of Fame than what Rasheed Wallace accomplished. And I'm not trying to diminish anybody. This was just a conversation. I just looked at 2 extremely talented guys that wore the red, white, and blue in Detroit. But like, even though they were loved by the fans, loved by their peers, and they are basically both held up into this almost like mythological tier of basketball players, which we occasionally get. And I just feel like people remember the idea of what Rasheed Wallace and what Blake Griffin could be versus what they actually were. But this was a conversation I recently had. I'd love to hear people's thoughts. Tell me I'm wrong. Tell me if you think Rasheed Wallace belongs in the Hall of Fame. I personally don't, because I feel like there's just too much meat left on the bones. And Blake Griffin, for all the talent he had, the 6 All-Star appearances, the 5 All-NBA teams, it still feels like there was still meat left on the bones. Like, he should for sure have like 8 to 10 All-Star appearances. I know injuries played a factor, and I also feel like he should have more All-NBA teams. I feel like he was one of the most talented players in the league for certainly a top 15 player for a few years. I just feel like the injuries and then kind of the immaturity where it felt like, and I don't even want to say immaturity, I'm just thinking of the thing when he grabbed the trainer's head and did that motion. But I do remember Blake Griffin also being like, what else is there outside of basketball? And I felt like that hurt him, where you have all these guys drooling over all the ability and the skill and the talent and the athleticism that he brought to the floor. But then you have him where it's like, well, I'm also a funny guy and I want to be a comedian and like I want to be in entertainment. And then I feel like the media and other people voting on this stuff and, you know, who we're supposed to be listening to just said, well, if you're not going to take it seriously, why should I give you serious awards? Why should we beef up your resume? Even though the talent speaks for itself, it's just you're not taking the game serious enough for us because you want to do other things. So we're gonna punish you for that. That's what it feels like with Blake Griffin. But between the two, if I had to put money on it, I would say Blake Griffin goes into the Hall of Fame over a Rasheed Wallace because of the resumes. I think they're equally talented. I think they're equally skillful. I think they both left an impact on the game of basketball that's why they'll be remembered for years later. But I think in terms of who had the better resume of getting in, Rasheed has the championship, which is probably more important, but Blake Griffin has the better Hall of Fame resume, in my opinion. So we've been talking about Daniss Jenkins a lot recently on like social media because I've said it before in the last episode. There's just a ton of stats being pulled because it's, you know, it's the offseason. We're going to look over this stuff. And it really paints more of a picture of Daniss Jenkins as like someone that's not efficient and someone that can't score the ball at a high clip. And I've been bullish and I've said I think he's going to have a large role for Detroit, and I think he will. because I don't know if Ebuka Okorie will be ready rookie year to take minutes away from him. And that's what this whole conversation is about. Like, who would you rather have with, if you're Cade Cunningham, not even if you're Cade Cunningham, but you're looking at this Pistons team and you're seeing, look, we just came off 60 wins. We got to the second round. We played 14 games in the playoffs. We need a little bit of push, maybe some punch coming off the bench. That's why you draft Ebuka with the 17th pick. But then you're kind of relying on a rookie to help you keep pushing this team forward. You're a 60-win team. Are you really going to rely on a rookie? That's why I love the conversation of, would I rather play Daniss Jenkins or just develop Ebuka and give him the minutes? I'm going to go with Daniss, because even though Daniss isn't efficient and he struggled in his first full season in the NBA, I think he'll be more efficient this year. But also, he's proven at the NBA that he's a pretty good playmaker and he can take care of the ball. I don't know what Ebuka can do yet with real NBA minutes. So that's why, like, when it comes to this conversation of who am I giving minutes to, I'm giving minutes to Daniss, because this team is poised to make another playoff push. And I forget who just posted this on Twitter, but they said that the Detroit Pistons are 10th, according to them, as a serious team that could compete for a championship. They are 10th out of the teams. 10 out of 10. That's where they're at. So if I'm looking at that, and as a fan, I'm thinking there's no way you can play Ebuka. I understand Summer League. I've seen the college highlights. I've seen what he did in college. It is all great. But you're a 60-win team. NBA media is looking at you and saying you did enough this offseason where I think you are a serious contender. If things go right, you could potentially be holding the Larry O'Brien trophy. You could be hoisting that up, and you can be winning that 4th championship, and there'll be a certain podcaster that's stuck in a dilemma of whether to change his name or not. Anyways, you don't give minutes to the rookie unless you are absolutely sure that they can contribute. I think there will be minutes for Ebuka. I just don't see him being a huge part of the rotation right away. And I do see that with Daniss, because there still is a lack of creation coming from the bench. There is still a lack of someone that won't turn the ball over and can still run the offense when Cade sits. That's what you get with Daniss. The mystery is still out on Ebuka. So, like, what does Ebuka have to do then to become part of the rotation? And I think it's pretty simple. Just don't turn the ball over. It sounds crazy, but that is what the Pistons are looking for. If you're a rookie and you can come in and you can take care of the ball for 3 to 5 minutes or whatever while Cade sits and catches a breath, if you can take over the ball, if you can initiate the offense and you can hit open shots, that will be a part of the rotation. And it seems easy enough. I do think Ebuka can do that. I think the defense will come later. I mean, he's 6'1". I'm expecting him to get hunted when he's on the floor. If he can do a good enough job defensively as a rookie where he's not being hunted, then maybe he deserves a few more minutes. But I think that really what it comes down to for Ebuka to get rotation minutes and to basically make us forget about Daniss is take care of the ball, keep the low turnover rate, show us that you can be a decision maker in the NBA, where you can make the tough decisions, where you can run the offense, where we can rely on you when Cade sits, and just hit open shots. That's all I need you to do. I don't need you to be a lights out shooter. I don't need you to be, I mean, I would love for him to come in and average 12, 14 a game and really prove that what he did in college was the real deal. But, like, I don't need that right away. I just need you to be able to hit shots and take care of the ball. That is how I think Ebuka gets minutes over Daniss Jenkins. And that's how I think we forget about Daniss, is if Ebuka can do those things. But, like, I've seen fans say Detroit drafted him for immediate production. Look, no, there is no way Trajan Langdon and the Detroit Pistons drafted Ebuka because they're like, we need him to come in and produce right away. No, that's not. The thought is, look, these are what we're looking for in a player. He's a 17th pick. Yes, he's a little undersized, but he gives us what we're looking for. We're going to see if this archetype actually fits around Cade Cunningham. Now it's Ebuka's moment to get minutes and prove that he can play alongside and with Cade Cunningham. I don't know if Ebuka is going to be that guy. I do not know. That's why I'm still giving the keys to Daniss. But like and look, and I think this upcoming season for Ebuka, you're going to see a lot of G League, and his minutes are going to be all over the place unless he really shines in training camp. It's going to be hard to get like a real assessment of Ebuka, I think, until later on in the season when the Pistons have already secured a playoff spot and they just want to rest guys. I just think with Ebuka, there's a lot of mystery. There's a lot to love, but he's also a rookie drafted 17th overall. It's going to be hard for him to get the minutes. That's why if you are asking this question, if you are having conversations with your friends, or if you're on Reddit, or if you're on social media, I think the stance you should take is like Daniss has proven that he can create and that the offense doesn't stall when Cade sits. And we don't know with Ebuka yet, because I've seen a lot of people just pumping Ebuka up, and it's just like, let's just slow down a little bit. I was wondering, like, since we're talking about people coming off the bench, whether they're going to be a part of the rotation, like, when you look at this team, who do you think will actually be the sixth man? Because, like, I think the starting lineup would be Cade, Isaiah Joe, Ausar, John Collins, and Jalen Duren. Those would be the five that I start. And the six-man thing is really interesting to me because I could see it being Ron Holland for the energy. I could see it being Daniss Jenkins for the creation and the playmaking. I could see it being Paul Reed because he can play the 4 or the 5, and he brings you defense, post, outside shooting, rebounding. Like, he brings you a little bit of everything. And then I thought, why not Duncan Robinson? Like, Duncan Robinson has proved that he can contribute off the bench. I don't know if he would win a Sixth Man of the Year award, but I think Duncan is a good enough pro to where it doesn't matter what his role is. It doesn't matter if he's playing 30 minutes a night or 20 minutes a night. He is going to do the same thing, which is attack closeouts, shoot threes, and give you effort on defense. He's going to do those three things, and that's it. And I think he's the perfect six man. He's not like the traditional six, like a Lou Williams or Jamal Crawford, where they can create their own offense. But he's a guy that, once you sit Isaiah Joe, you still got elite shooting coming off the bench. He actually does have a decent drive game when attacking closeouts. He's an underrated passer. Like, you can go and watch him. Like, it's fun to watch Duncan Robinson do his thing because I felt like he definitely got pigeonholed into a role and there was more to his game. We just haven't been able to see it. And now it's kind of late in his career to be like, let's just do new things. But I think if you're actually having the conversation of sixth man, I really think it comes down to Duncan Robinson. I think it's either going to be Isaiah Joe or Duncan Robinson. It really just depends on who's going to start. But I think Isaiah Joe should be getting the bulk of the minutes. I don't think you trade for him to come off the bench. I know I said on earlier podcasts that I could see him having a similar role in Detroit like he does in Oklahoma City. But I do think in Detroit they brought him in to be the starter. I think the starting spot is his. I think they love what you get with Duncan Robinson, but also at the same time, it's like, well, Duncan's efficient whether he comes off the bench or he starts anyways. So why wouldn't I start the other guy? I just don't know if it's actually a serious conversation for anybody else outside of Duncan Robinson. Maybe Paul Reed. Like, I know I mentioned other names, but I do think sixth man will be Duncan Robinson. I think he will be the first person off the bench because he gives you some versatility through, like, he can play 2 or 3, and he could even play some 4 depending on what you're trying to do offensively. Even if it's for a few minutes, he could get out there and play the 4. We don't need him. I mean, you're not going to rely on him to do that, but in short bursts, he could do that. You could add more shooting out there. Maybe John Collins, maybe Ausar's killing it, and maybe Isaiah Joe's killing it, and John Collins is struggling. So you're just like, screw it. Let's throw Duncan Robinson in at the 4, and let's just have elite spacing out here for Duren, Ausar, and Cade Cunningham. It would be crazy. But yeah, that's my take, is Duncan Robinson. I think he will be the first guy off the bench for the Detroit Pistons. I don't think Duncan Robinson starts unless there's an injury. I really don't. I hope when we get into the season that we don't see so much flip-flopping with the lineup depending on matchups. Like, I love consistency in the lineup. Like, I understand if, someone's struggling and you're like, you know what, maybe we should scale back his role a little bit and, just kind of hide him so he's not being destroyed on social media, because I know players care about that. or whatever. Maybe his confidence doesn't get too low. But I just don't want to see, like, I've seen some people think we're going to go through multiple lineup changes at the start of the season just to see who fits. And I don't want that. I hope they can figure this out during training camp. Now, obviously, if there's a trade right before the season starts, I could see why you would flirt with the lineups and try to make adjustments because you're trying to figure out where someone new fits into it. But if you go on all training camp, I don't know about you guys. I just don't want to see all these different lineup changes. I don't want to see Isaiah Joe start for 2 games, have 2 good games. Then JB's like, no, we're going to throw Duncan in because he gives us more height on this, and then we can do this off the bench. Like, I don't want to see any of that stuff. I want to see the same 5 from the beginning to the end as long as everybody's healthy. Now, obviously, if someone plays out of their mind, then that's when you make a change. But I just don't want to see multiple different lineup changes at the beginning of the season. I can't stand that. I think that's hard for players, especially at the beginning of the year when you're trying to find some rhythm. I just think this Pistons team right now is that you have a lot of shot makers and you have a lot of guys that do a lot of the same thing that you probably could plug and play, but that's when you look at the different nuances of their game. Like, you look at Duncan Robinson and you're like, man, there is a little bit more to explore about his game. Maybe we do bring him off the bench and we give him a different role off the bench when Cade sits. Maybe we give him more opportunities where he gets to drive and kick and create for others because he can do that. But in the starting lineup, we don't really get to see that as much because the ball is in Cade's hands. Maybe that's what you do. Maybe you say, like, Isaiah Joe is him and Duncan Robinson. They're probably the same elite shooters, but Isaiah Joe, he would thrive better next to a Cade Cunningham because he doesn't have the ability to create or drive and kick like a Duncan Robinson. So he's more of a movement shooter that we're looking for, and that's his role. And then, I don't know, maybe that's why you do it. But, like, again, I'm going to end it with this. I think Duncan Robinson's the 6th man for the Detroit Pistons this year. I think the writing's on the wall, and I think he's going to have a hell of a season. I think Isaiah Joe starts, and that's why you brought him in. That's how I'm going to end this. Thank you guys for listening to the 3 Championship Drive podcast. Do me a favor, follow, subscribe, rate, review, but more importantly, tell a Pistons fan.